Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, Sow, Grow, Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of Sow, Grow, Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper. And today we're diving into the world of impact investing, sustainable food systems, and the power of action-driven philanthropy. Our guest is Nick Cooney, founder and managing partner at Lever VC. It is a trailblazing early-stage venture capital fund focused on food tech, ag tech, and sustainable food innovation. Nick's journey is remarkable. Not only has he helped shape the future of food through venture capital, he has spent over 2 decades in the nonprofit world championing causes to reduce animal suffering and promote sustainability. He is the founder and board chair of Lever Foundation, a global nonprofit working across Asia to drive change in food supply chains. And he also founded the Humane League and co-founded the Good Food Institute, 2 powerhouse organizations advancing the alternative protein movement. And if that's not enough, he is also the author of 4 insightful books on philanthropy and change-making. His latest, What We Don't Do, Inaction in the Face of Suffering and the Drive to Do More, which we are going to dive in deep today. So welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thanks so much, Haley. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so I would love to know more about your background as someone who's actually started her career in the food industry in Malawi, Africa. I would love to know a little bit more about your background and how you have blended venture capitalism with the philanthropic world.
Sure. So I got interested in food and food systems in college as I was starting college, from reading and realizing the very significant negative impacts that certain aspects of the food system have. So the incredible cruelty to animals that factory farming causes, the environmental consequences of various aspects of food production, the health impacts, and so forth. And so began getting involved from the nonprofit, charitable side of things at that point. As you mentioned earlier, ended up founding or co-founding a couple nonprofits in the category, and spent much of my early career working from that NGO side of things. So helping start and then build up nonprofits, that we're working to advance a more humane and sustainable food system from one method or another. We got into the investment side of things 10 years ago in 2015. And so the reason and way of getting involved, there was starting to be growth of the plant-based foods and alternative protein categories, which are categories that by displacing conventional animal proteins have this really significant positive benefits for sustainability, for public health, for animal welfare. And as those sectors were just starting to grow and starting to get their first bits of investment funding, I had the sense that there could be an opportunity helping the sector grow, had the potential to do a lot of good across those different fronts. So began investing in 2015 with a US family office where I helped them set up an investment vehicle and helped them run that for the first several years. And then in 2018, I left that and started the firm I'm managing partner with today called Lever VC. But I've certainly focusing on the investment side for these past 6-7 years. I've continued to be very actively involved in the nonprofit and philanthropic space through the charity I set up, Lever Foundation, and other work on the philanthropic side. So somebody who very much believes in the importance of both the NGO charity philanthropy approach to making change and also the great potential for change that comes with technological innovation.
Yeah, that's amazing. And similarly, in college, I studied kinesiology and took a nutrition class. We had to watch all of the videos on the animal cruelty and the cow farms and the chicken farms and how, close together they were housed and just how they were treated. And it was really eye-opening for me. I mean, I had heard about it, but then you see it and it's just a whole different level of wanting to do something. And it not only affects the animals, but it affects us at the end line of food production and what we're consuming. And yeah, I think that's such important work. And how do you see both an investment and philanthropic side complementing each other in the fight for a more sustainable food system?
I think there's a lot of interplays. So one would be technological innovation or formulation innovation. Things that come up with new solutions are very powerful, but it's not really if you build it, they will come. Like the reality is not if you build it, they will come. So someone or some team has to create those novel solutions. But then the question is, okay, well, how do you get those solutions to be adopted? If the new solutions significantly lower cost, then maybe it's easier for them to get adopted, but there's still always lots of friction points. People don't know about it, don't hear about it, like doing things the way they've done things before, et cetera, et cetera. Even things that have very direct benefits can take a long time to diffuse and spread in a country and let alone globally. And then when some of these technological innovations might have upfront costs, maybe there's some additional capital expenses you need to put some new machinery in your facility, put a lot of new machinery in. Maybe some of them have great benefits on the sustainability or animal welfare or public health side, but they cost a little more. Then you've got those cost barriers in place that are also a barrier that needs to be overcome for these new technologies to spread. And so I think that what good, effective, charitable efforts can do, in part, along with doing lots of other things, of course, but what they can do in this area is help those good new innovations spread, whether it's getting more consumers to want to try products produced in these better ways, getting companies to move their sourcing policies or what they're offering in the direction of these improvements, using the existence of these new technologies to press for regulatory changes, whatever that may be. I think the NGO charitable space can be very helpful for getting new technologies to spread much more quickly. And at the same time, I think charitable efforts can be very helpful in inspiring more investment capital and technology R&D and government support to go into the creation of those new technologies if there's good advocacy done on that end. So I think there's clearly a big interplay between those two sides that can, if done well, help move those things along much more quickly.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, and I've had, her name is Ali Lebeck on the podcast. I forget what episode it was, but it was talking about impact investing and financing in the nonprofit sector. And I think when it comes to advocacy or R&D, a lot of nonprofits think there isn't funding in that space or the ability to advocate for certain policies around whatever they're facing. But we're talking about sustainable food systems. So how do you envision nonprofits being able to advocate for a more sustainable food world?
I think there certainly are lots of public charities as well as individuals out there that are doing exactly that, advocating for a more sustainable world and more sustainable food system, and lots of different ways that they are tackling it, some from the consumer side, from the regulatory side, from the corporate side. With Lever Foundation, the charity I set up in about 6-7 years back, that works to advance more sustainable food systems with focus on Asia. Two main areas that we've chosen, that the foundation has chosen to focus on because of them seeming to be particularly high impact. So one, and what the majority of the time and effort is spent on at the foundation, is corporate policy change. So getting large companies, be they global companies or more regional companies, to put improved sourcing policies in place that they will then work towards moving and meeting in the years to come. So the Lever Foundation, for example, has been able to get a couple hundred companies over these past 6-7 years to commit to these improvements. And this is a way that can really move the needle for significant volumes of food, for significant volumes of animal lives and animal suffering, significant volumes of carbon emissions, those sort of things. And companies can just move a lot more quickly than regulation. They are much more responsive to consumer opinion at many times than regulation can be. And corporate policy changes prevent the need from every individual consumer to have to proactively make a more ethical decision or a healthier decision each time that they're choosing what to eat for that particular meal. So that's been a particularly powerful tool, I think, over the last 15, 20 years for creating progress within the food system. I think that will continue. The other thing that the Lever Foundation focuses on is secondarily public opinion, with that focus being on Asia. Here in the US, where we're based, you and I are based, it would be great to have even greater awareness, but there's at least some baseline level of awareness of some of the negative aspects of the food system. And a lot more is needed here, for sure. But in some other parts of the world, including Asia, which is home to the majority of the world's population, the majority of the world's animal protein production, and those things are only going to continue to increase in the years ahead, there is extremely little knowledge for the average person in terms of what is going on. What does factory farming look like? What are the harms caused by it? What are some of the other negative externalities of industrialized food systems? And so the foundation does put a chunk of its work into helping educate consumers in those markets about that and about some of the other things that it works on. So that's what Lever Foundation has chosen to work on, but certainly there's other groups and entities doing work on the regulatory side that's been really powerful, doing things to spur technological innovation like that NGO, the Good Food Institute, does, and others. So indeed, a lot of different ways to try to make incremental progress in this area.
Yeah, definitely. And I seen, I'm in California and there are some, they're fast food chains, but that have very strict policies around where they source food and how they source food, whether it is their produce or their meat sources. And it's been challenging for them to continue to remain ethical in the ways that they set out those values because of the way the food system has changed over the years, but they remain committed. And when we're talking about a sustainable food system, and that's what you're working towards, how do you define that? Or what would be the ideal world that you envision for a sustainable food system?
Yeah. So I think in the sort of ideal vision of the food system, like what's the ideal to try to move closer towards or as close as we as individuals and our choices and we as a society can. So ideally, number one, we're getting very healthy, nutritious food. So that's obviously critical for lowering disease-related mortality, extending lifespan, those sort of things. So we're getting very healthy food with the most moderate amount of environmental impact that we can create. Of course, there's going to be environmental impact. Of course, it takes a lot of land, water resources to do it, but trying to moderate those costs, land, water, et cetera, costs as much as possible. And then also reducing animal suffering as much as possible on that animal protein side of things. The level of animals on factory farms experience more suffering than any body of other animals anywhere in the world. So if we're just looking at suffering in the world around us, factory farming is just a source of so much cruelty. And so reducing that as much as possible, both by decreasing the number of animals raised for food, and then for those that are raised, decreasing the amount of suffering they go through. I think that would be the other very important pillar of the more ideal food system than the one that we have today in most parts of the world, including here in the US. So yeah, I think that's the ideal, and any steps we can take to get closer to that world those are good steps to try to take.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there has been a level of advancement towards that vision. And you said that you focus on early stage companies of food tech and ag tech. What are some of the most exciting innovations you've recently seen that you believe could reshape how the world eats?
Yeah, there's such a huge number. I'll just give a couple, quickly, maybe a couple random examples. Our team was just chatting earlier today about a company we're considering investment into that developed a more natural type of fungicide. So something you would put on plant crops to prevent the spread of crop disease. Crop disease can, in certain parts of the world and at certain times, just destroy a meaningful chunk of a crop, which means you just need a lot more land, a lot more resources to get the same amount of food because you're losing a bunch to loss. We're considering investment currently in a company that has this novel, more natural solution to both replace the use of chemical or synthetic fungicides, and that can have increased success rates, so losing a lot less of the crop to disease. So something that, if it works, and this particular solution seems to work well, can just save a lot of land from the production of crops that everyone is eating, rice, corn, soy, things along those lines. On the kind of more science fiction-y side of things, or not science fiction, but high-tech, truly high-tech side of things, we at Lever VC have done some investments into companies producing real meat or dairy proteins via technologies like precision fermentation or cell cultivation. But ultimately, what you get out the other end is real, molecularly identical, bioidentical chicken protein, lamb protein, beef protein, pork, etc. But that's produced without the need for live animals in the supply chain. And so this technology is still in its earlier stages. It's just started to go on sale in very small quantities in the US and a few other countries. It's super early. It's going to take time to develop, like all groundbreaking new technologies. But it's one where in the years, decades to come, I think has enormous promise for helping supplement and ultimately reduce the amount of animals that need to be raised for food, which is pretty critical if we're talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, lowering animal suffering, and even reducing food safety risks, animal-borne disease risks, and so forth. So yeah, we invest across a wide range of things, but those will be a couple examples of interesting technologies being developed.
Yeah, and I've worked a lot in organizations serving people experiencing hunger and homelessness. And I'm just thinking about, as we're advancing to more technology and just the way that the prices have increased in the US and across the world for food, how can philanthropy and venture capitalism step in to make sure that this healthy and nutritious food is accessible for all? Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfield is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today.
It's a great question. Yeah, the promise of venture capital at its heart is basically just moving money into the hands of young, privately owned companies. So moving money in that direction. Obviously, the expectation from the venture capital fund side is, here's a really promising financial opportunity. If I put money into the company, in exchange, I get to own a piece of the company that will help that company grow and succeed at what it's doing. I'll make money. The company will be a success when things go well. And that can have positive impacts if that capital flow, that investment is going into companies with solutions or products that actually do improve things. It could be neutral, kind of replacing one existing player with another that doesn't really move the needle either direction, or it can be negative depending on what's being invested in. So it's just a ethically neutral, for lack of a better term, tool that can be used for good, neutral impact or bad. On the good side, as we were chatting about earlier, I think if there is investment funding directed to new technologies or ingredients or products that are better than what they're replacing, more sustainable, more humane, healthier for consumers, that is how venture capital dollars and investment dollars generally can be a force for good. It can just speed up both the development of new technologies. It can make the development of new technologies possible in the first place. It can speed up their development. It can speed up their growth in the market and their use in the market, and thus can have a very nice positive impact. On the nonprofit side, I think there's probably a much broader range of ways that nonprofit work can be a part of the solution here. And we touched on a number of those earlier: changing corporate policy, changing government legislation, changing consumer opinion and what consumers choose to buy and how they feel about different issues. Certainly there's other areas as well. But I think, the NGO work is probably more robust in terms of the number of things it can do, just because of the model of charitable work more generally.
Yeah, and I think also being on the ground and listening to the community and what the community needs, right? Because what food might work over here might not be culturally relevant over here, right? And so we kind of have to utilize those people who are on the ground and understand what is needed to then go to the systems and the policies and advocate for change that'll actually happen on the grassroots level.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So your newest book explores inaction and our internal barriers to helping others. What led you to write your 4th book? We'll start there. What led you to write this new book?
Indeed. So as you mentioned, and per the title, What We Don't Do, the focus of the book is the harms that happen from inaction. My inaction, your inaction, everyone's inaction. When we choose not to put the time we have, the energy we have, the money we have to help those who are in need, to help addressing the issues that are out there, the incredibly high cost that can have. When we think about, probably most of us don't stop to think about this too much, but if we do stop to think about, am I living a good life? Am I a good person? Is this person good or bad? We tend to focus on actions. So good things you may have done to help others, bad things you may have done that hurt others. And that makes sense. Obviously, those things matter. But today, the reality today is that for most of us in the US and other industrialized countries, wealthy to somewhat wealthy countries, the reality is the harms that happen in the world around us from our own inactions are far worse than any harms we'll cause by things we directly do to another person. Then, of course, we can get into examples of why that is. But that's really the thesis of the book. And so the reason I wrote the book is it's something that I felt for many years and even decades at this point, and certainly informs how I try to live my life and what I try to do and feel obliged to do with my money, time, and energy. That's just not really in the public discourse that much. No other full-length books that had been written about it previously. So I felt important to get the idea on paper, talk through for the reader the implications, the whys, the hows, and then also try to provide some inspiration and motivation to readers in helping them realize that actually you may feel like you don't have the ability to create a lot of change in the world. You might feel like you're not that powerful. But the reality is nearly every one of us has this huge amount of power to dramatically improve the lives of many others. Can't fix everything, but hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of others. Most of us have the ability to dramatically improve the lives of those sort of numbers of people. And so, those were the motivations that went into writing the book.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And like you said, it's not really part of the public conversation. And what are some of the internal barriers that you identified to helping others?
Yeah, so I think maybe two biggest ones. One, which is not really the focus of the book, but which is important, is once we want to help others and we take action to help others, how smart are we about it? Like, how effective is the particular charity we donate to or the thing we spend our time volunteer doing? In the US alone, there's something like 1.5 million charities go outside the US, and that number, of course, continues to increase. So there's a lot of efforts being done to do good, and it can be hard to find out which approaches, which programs are actually very effective. So I'd say that's one step. What the book really focuses on is the other step, which is whether we try to act to do good in the first place. How much of our money do we put towards trying to help others? How much of our time do we put towards that? How much of our mental energy, the mental bandwidth we have each day, how much of that is focused on how could I reduce suffering in the world? How could I help others be happier and improve things? And so I think in that area, there are very real internal psychological barriers. If you think about any piece of machinery or anything out there that exists in the world, it's been optimized over time for some purpose. We build an airplane, it's optimized to fly in the sky really well, right? Except I have a soda on my desk here. It was optimized to be really tasty for consumers. We as people, what were we optimized for? Like, how were we built? We evolved over obviously hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And through evolution optimized us to survive. And to survive not in 2025 in the US, but to survive in these pre-agrarian, when we lived in small tribes on the savannah, hunter-gatherers and so forth. And so that's what our bodies and our minds were optimized for. And that's obviously great. And that's why we're alive today and that's why we're here. But it does mean that there's lots of these intuitions, psychological aspects, biases baked into our mental, psychological hardwiring that don't necessarily steer us towards really trying to help others or to do a lot of good in the world or to be very logical about how we do it. And we're a very social species. So kind of, the good there is that we are fairly hardwired to want to help those we are close to. We just instinctually want to help and protect our family, our close friends, those right around us. That's great. And it's really valuable. But we don't necessarily have much of an inclination at all to help those who are distant from us, who we don't see, people living 10,000 miles away, let alone, say, animals, which are not even the same species as us. And we're not inclined to help those who are out of sight and therefore out of mind. And so we typically don't feel that good when we do. Like, you help an old lady across the street, you feel very good. Give money to save the life of somebody that lives 10,000 miles away. It's a great thing to do, but we don't necessarily feel super warm and fuzzy when we do it. So there's this real disjunction between what feels good to do, like acts of helping that feel good, and therefore motivates us to do a lot more of them, and actions that make a really positive impact out in the world for others, but may not resonate with us. Those would be examples. And just one more I'll throw out there of another barrier to creating significant changes. Again, we were built for survival. And for nearly the entirety of human existence, where resources were scarce, and so having enough food, having enough clothing, housing, etc., were really crucial, and you couldn't just give those things away without putting yourself at great risk. And that was reality for millions of years. Today, for a good number of us, that's fortunately not the case, right? We've got extra money in our bank account. We are not in danger of not having the food to eat, at least, again, in countries like the US, for most of us. And so we're in this position now where we have way more resources than we need to be happy, to be healthy, to be secure. And so it would be great if we could just give a lot of those excess resources to those who really need them, those who really have no money, really are suffering, really are starving, etc. But our inclination is not to do that, is to hoard it. As wealth in the US has gone up over the past 50 years, per capita wealth in the US has gone up about tenfold. Level of charitable giving, like the percentage of our money we give to charity, not changed at all. If anything, it's very slightly decreased. Yeah. I think that's just a good reflection of the fact that we are not hardwired to give away our extra resources to people who really need them. So These will be some examples of, I think, the internal barriers we face between just how we are as built as human beings and getting to a place where we're doing a lot more good for others in the world around us.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And if anyone's listening and you want to dive deep into what Nick just said about how wealth has gone up and philanthropy has gone down, they can, my team will link to the Giving USA report that is actually probably coming out in the next few weeks. That comes out and talks about charitable giving and wealth and philanthropy over the last year. And it's a great report to dive into that. And then also I had someone from the Lilly School of Philanthropy on the podcast who does a lot of research around that as well, and donor trends. And I think that's relating to what you're talking about. So if that listener, I think, like you mentioned, we are in a very individualistic society, consumer society, wanting more. And you mentioned hoarding. Like, how can we begin to shift? And some of it is, like you said, we're hardwired in these ways, but that doesn't mean that we can't change. We can change the way that we are wired and begin to change those neurological pathways that help us go to one way, and then we can start to shift. So what are some of the ways that you talk about in the book that people can begin to shift those narratives and begin to help the people in their community and abroad?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. Another great thing about us is just as human beings is we do have this neuroplasticity. We can get into new habits, and things that we may have no interest in now, we start doing them, they start becoming very rewarding for us. So indeed, giving more of what we have to help those in need, it's just a matter of changing habits. And once we get into the habit of doing it, it's easy to maintain. And we can get a lot of meaning and enjoyment out of doing it. So how to move in that direction? I think a couple of things. One is, I think, just reflection, just taking the time to reflect on, what do I really want in life? What is ultimately like really the most important thing for me? For myself personally, and how I would answer that in my own life is, there's two things that are most important to me that I would most like to achieve or have. And so one is personal happiness, right? I want to be safe, secure, have love, have friendship, have enjoyable life experiences. I want that. The other thing is I would like to reduce as much suffering in the world around me as I can, because that just seems like a clearly good thing. And so I think just having that, and other people will come to, of course, different ways they would frame what's most important to them. But I think if we stop and we reflect on that, probably many of us will have, in addition to that desire for personally enjoyable things in life, I think most people have that instinct to wanting to have a life that's meaningful, wanting to have a positive impact on others, make a difference, et cetera. I think for most people that would be there. And for many people, it might even be as strong as the sort of more personal, self-interested, or stronger than that. And so I think reflecting on that and then thinking, okay, if that is really one of my most important goals in life, something I really believe and want, then what would it take to get there? Like, how do I get to that goal? And how do I, just as we might try to, if we're trying to build wealth, we might try to just increase the number of dollars in our bank as much as possible. In this way, if my goal is to help others, to make a difference, to reduce suffering in the world, how can I do that more than I am now? And then next month, how can I increase that further and further? I think having that high-level goal in mind, I think is probably step number one, that then prompts us to think about how to actually do it in practice. And then the second thing I would say is stretching ourselves and being willing to be uncomfortable. If we think about people who are successful in any career field or in any endeavor, think professional athletes or Olympic athletes, think doctors who go through very intense medical school, investment bankers who work extremely, excruciatingly long hours, et cetera, those in the military. Most people who work to be successful in those sort of endeavors, they embrace and they're happy and willing to embrace significant discomfort to be successful at that goal. I think that's what kind of we need to do if we want to have a better impact on the world. Start flexing that charitable muscle, right? And if you're trying to build actual muscle, how do you do it? You literally tear your muscles in small ways, so micro tears. You go through some painful process and then it builds back stronger and then it's easier to do and it just builds and builds. I think the same thing with charitable efforts. Give more than you're comfortable with, not to your level of comfort, more of your time, more of your money, more of your mental energy, to the point of slight discomfort, and keep doing that over time. And you'll be not only able to give more and more, but actually enjoy and happy giving more and more of what you have to give, because you get used to it over time and you can see the positive outcomes at the other side. So I'd say those will be a couple, in my mind, important starting points, or starting points that could help one move much more fully in that direction.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And someone on my podcast, a dear friend of mine, Jen Klein, wrote a book called Giving is Selfish, and she refers to Denzel Washington graduate speech talking about how generosity boomerangs back to you. And so she talks about 4 different types of giving, not just charitable giving, but how if you are in that uncomfortable, you give a little bit out of your comfort level, that generosity is going to boomerang back to you in some way, shape, or form. And I had another friend also talk about when you're talking about identifying your values, he had a mentor tell him to write his obituary. What would you want to have people say in your obituary? What do you want your legacy to be? And then when you're working towards philanthropy or generosity or the way that you make choices daily, have them reflect that so that one day when someone is writing an obituary or they're talking about your legacy, it will reflect those values.
Yeah, that's such a powerful self-reflection tool, indeed, the obituary approach. I've never done it myself, but it makes a lot of sense. And I too have heard from some others who went through that, and it really changed or significantly changed the course of their life and what they put focus on. Sounds like a great tool.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't done it either. I've just heard a few other friends do it, but I have my own mission statement personally, my own values, as well as for my family. And then we make decisions based on, for my business personally, and then for our family, like how we want to operate within the world. And I think it's such a powerful tool to take a step back and just really reflect on those values. And obviously they can change over time and they're ever evolving. But what would one last piece of advice that you would have for anyone listening to this episode related to your book?
Yeah, so I'll answer that with a real life example of a situation that we all find ourselves in all the time, but we don't usually think we're making an ethical choice, but we are. And that is with the use of money. And we could say the same thing about time. We could say the same thing about mental energy. But money is such a powerful tool that I'll just give an example from the side of money. So let's say I've got $100 sitting in my pocket, thinking about going out to dinner with my wife. And so let's say it would cost about $100 to go to a nice restaurant, get some drinks, get some food, dessert, have a good time. Why would I want to do this? That's some novelty. It's a little more different than eating at home. Probably the food's going to be better than if we just cook it ourselves. So it would be nice. It would give me a couple hours, 2 hours of enjoyment, a little bit of novelty, slightly better tasting food for the evening. And that's great. That's something that I would enjoy, that we would enjoy. What's another way? What are the other ways I could use that $100? Well, among, of course, endless other options, one other way I could use that $100 is donate it to a charity that helps restore sight to people who have lost it through cataracts. And really efficient charities in that area for about $100 could give sight back to 2 people. Or to use an animal charity example, because we were touching on that earlier, if I give that $100 to really effective animal charities, they could spare literally a couple hundred animals from a lifetime of abuse. Those are shocking to realize that relatively small amounts of money can do things like give someone their sight back, save their life, feed them for 6 months, spare dozens of animals from a life of suffering, etc. But that is the reality with really efficient charities. And so every time we are spending money on something, we are making a choice of what will we bring into the world. And in this very kind of boring day-to-day example of, do I go out to dinner or do I do something else with that $100? Those 2 options of what I can bring about in the world are, number 1, I get a little bit tastier food and a little bit more enjoyment for one evening that's then over. Or 2 people have their sight back for the rest of their life, or hundreds of animals don't go through excruciating suffering every year. When we think about that, when we think about the alternate uses of our money and the things that they could bring about in the world, and we keep that in mind with the spending decisions we make, I think that's a really important and powerful tool to enable ourselves to ultimately give a lot more to effective things, and through that, bring about a lot more change in the world. And in addition to that, a really major positive impact that can have on the world around us, I think the cherry on top for ourselves is it's just a way of making choices where we're just more thoughtful about bringing about into the world the things that ultimately matter the most to us. Because I think for most of us, when we think about those 2 outcomes, a bit happier for 2 hours, 2 people can see for the rest of their life. I think leaving aside anything to do with ethics, just from a personal preference, like, oh yeah, that second thing, that's probably more important to me. That's something I would prefer to bring about in the world. I would rather do that. And I think taking the time to reflect on that every time we spend money, we're making this sort of choice, It's tough to keep in mind. It creates like really ethically challenging reality, but it is true. It is the reality, existential reality that we're all in. And keeping that in mind, I think can help us have a tremendously larger impact for the world around us than if we don't keep that in mind.
I love that so much. And it sounds simple, right? But it is, you can make those daily choices. And like you said earlier, we do have the power. And even if it is small, even if it's $5, $10, like everything matters. And it really comes back to the values and the way that you want to make change in the world. And where can people find you, Nick? Where can they follow along with the work that you do?
Yeah, I'm not big on social media. LinkedIn would be the primary platform I'm on, and it's really more for work reasons, but I'm definitely on there. Nick Cooney, you can find me there. The book is What We Don't Do, and it's certainly available where you would buy books or audiobooks, so forth, Spotify, iTunes as well, etc. So those would be the two best places. I'm also easily reachable, so if anyone wants to reach out for any reason, pretty easy to find my contact information either via LinkedIn or via the organizations I'm part of, Lever VC or Lever Foundation.
Awesome. We will make sure to link to that all in the show notes. And I always love when people say reach out. So if you're listening to this, take advantage because people don't offer that lightly. And this conversation has just been so inspiring to me. It's something that I am so passionate about. And I am just so grateful for you.
Thank you so much. And likewise, really appreciate it.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.